Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Women on Top podcast. I'm your host, Valerie Lynn, and with over 15 years of business experience, I became truly passionate about finding ways to support and hear from way more women. And what we know to be true is that women thrive when they are in their favorite position, on top in business, in relationships, in personal growth, and on top in being real and authentic to who the hell they are. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the Women on Top podcast. Well, welcome back to another incredible episode of the Women on Top, everybody. And today I am so delighted and humbled to get to share space with Dr. Courtney Tracy, who is widely known as the Truth Doctor. She is a licensed clinical social worker, a doctor of psychology, and a mental health advocate who really blends this combination of raw and relatable honesty with her professional expertise. And I am just really obsessed with how she shows up. She has gained a massive following for her no BS approach to mental health, trauma, and she is one of the first therapists to really publicly disclose her own mental health challenges, which I think makes her especially unique and really a pioneer. So to me, she is the epitome of a woman on top. And Dr. Courtney's award-winning work has really been featured throughout many major media outlets. And she just continues to be this leading voice in the mental health space. And she's done a lot actually to help me with my own mental health. And so I am so excited to welcome you. And thank you for joining me, Dr. Courtney.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction. And I took it in as you were saying it, and I'm honored to be sharing space with you. So thank you for seeing me in all the ways that I've showed up.
Oh gosh, I so appreciate it. And as I was reflecting today on this conversation, I was thinking about what it was that initially connected me to you. And it's truly how you show up. And so it caused me to think about, what was it for you? Because so for anybody listening, if you don't follow Dr. Courtney, please go do that. I can't imagine somebody not following you, but the way that she shows up is very authentic. And when I say authentic, I mean completely pulling back the curtain to me. Like you have shared some very transparent pieces of your own journey. And that's very different, especially in the professional space. Like I really feel challenged with that, even working in my own job of gosh, how do I show up as my whole self and also hold this professional image as well? So what was it for you that you were like, gosh, I'm just going to pull back the curtain and make this happen and share myself with the world? What was that about?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. And I don't think I've been asked that question before. And maybe it's a question I should have asked myself already, even. I think really ultimately what it is growing up with nothing and knowing that I can survive that. I'm not afraid of anyone's opinion of me and what they might take away from me, because I can be whole without that. I think that's part of it. I mean, I wasn't whole, obviously. I created this life for myself, but I think that's part of it. And I think the other part is that I believe in what I know as a professional, and my brain doesn't, like the knowledge that I know of being a therapist doesn't disappear if my tattoos are showing, doesn't disappear if I'm in a bikini. But to others, some people may perceive that it does. And I'm here to prove that it doesn't.
I really love that, because that was what I personally connected to, was the fact that I like to use colorful language sometimes. And I think it's fun. It's part of my sass. It's just, part of my personality. I think it's fun sometimes to wear, certain clothes that are a little edgy, to wear the bold lipstick every once in a while. And you do that in such a way that I think you just really own it. And there's an inner calm confidence, which I think is different than the brash outward confidence. There's this innate confidence that you have. And I just wonder how more women can get that.
That's a good question. I mean, I think Well, I think my book can help a lot.
Yes.
I mean, it really is, as women, as humans, as anyone who has had a label placed on them. And like, yes, we're women, but like the label of woman means different things to different people. And so it is a label, although it's also true. And I think I'm not, I mean, maybe it's my autism, maybe it's my education, maybe it's my view on the world, but I just do not subscribe to one way to think about something. And that might be a very interesting statement for someone with borderline personality disorder to say, that I can't just think one way about something. And maybe that's one proof of my recovery. But two, I also think it's just, I refuse to be chained by what has existed on this world before I got here. And I want to make it different. And I will do it until the day that I die.
I love it. I love it. It is so inspiring. It gives me so much energy because it's also like you're kind of setting this example to me of like going first and allowing people to embrace all parts of themselves, not just the parts that we think society wants, us to show. Yeah. I have so many questions. Okay. So I want to start with this name, The Truth Doctor. So for people who don't know you, where does that name come from?
So my husband came up with the name The Truth Doctor. Oh. And it was because pretty much the main story that I tell in my book is after we had opened our first treatment center, there's this long story that you'll read, but he was publicly arrested and in the middle of a PTSD episode. And I started drowning in the stigma that I was trying to prevent. I was saying things to myself like, how could you own a treatment center when your husband was just arrested for a trauma episode? How can you be a therapist when you guys were drinking when it happened and you own a rehab? I started to feel like I needed to hide myself. And I had never been that person in my life. And I was a walking stigma, walking proof of the stigma of mental health, where I said, if we have mental health issues, we need to hide away. People aren't going to think that we can be trusted as professionals. And that unfortunate perspective lasted about 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I was only really able to believe that perspective by drowning myself in alcohol. I returned to my old behaviors, my old habits. I was so deeply embarrassed. And then I realized, what the fuck am I doing? This is not me at all. And I know that so many people find themselves stuck here in this exact place. And so what is the truth? The truth is, I'm a human being that happens to have a license to provide therapy, and I am just like you. And I am just like my clients. And the word doctor, the actual meaning of it is to teach or to heal. And so I teach and I heal through my truth. And it is a title that I have truly embodied over the last 5 years. And I don't think it could be any more appropriate.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so powerful. I teach and I heal through my truth. I feel like there are so many people that could be embracing that. Like, how many of us are trying to do something and stuff down the shadows of the dark parts of us and not let that be seen, but only shine the light. And I think that's your secret sauce, at least to me. It's you embrace this whole picture and you share the dark just as much as the light. And that's the transformative piece. Like, that's why I would want to work with you or listen to you or be influenced, is because I see myself in you. Right. And I really love that. So thank you for sharing that piece. And I love the name. So kudos to your husband.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I'm like, thanks, Max.
Yeah. You specialize and talk a lot about something called borderline personality disorder. I didn't know what this meant before really embracing some of your work and just listening to you. And I remember listening to a podcast on a walk. Like, I can remember where I was. And I was listening to you speak about this. And there were parts of it that resonated with me, which partly like terrified me and partly gave me this sense of clarity and calm. And I'd love to just dive into that a little bit. And if you could explain to folks, what is BPD and, how does it show up?
Definitely. So there are different types of mental health disorders. And one subset of a mental health disorder is a personality disorder, which is different from some disorders like depression or anxiety, panic disorder, where they can arise and then they can dissipate and your symptoms can be relieved. Back in the day, people thought personality disorders were not that type of disorder. They were pervasive, lifelong, inflexible, never changeable. And we have learned different things now. However, to explain what a personality disorder is kind of requires going back to that old definition. So we all, as humans, have personalities. And usually what a personality is a combination of traits. So in this situation with this person, we might act this way. In this situation with this person, we might act this way. Maybe it's a boss, a friend, a stranger. And we would adjust the way that we would interact with them based off of our goals. Like, what do we want from them? What do they want from us? Who are they in our life? But with a personality disorder, the brain usually only reacts in one way. Like, it has one defense mechanism, one way of engaging with the world, and that's it. And well, that's not it, but that's what we used to think. And borderline personality disorder was named borderline because researchers considered it to be on the borderline of psychosis and neurosis, meaning you literally obsess and freak out about everything. And you engage in the world in a way where it seems like you're not understanding how most other people would react in this situation. And it's more so like, it's not psychosis, but it's like something's going on that you're not seeing, like delusional, paranoid. And these are like big pathological words. Yeah. But ultimately what's happening in someone that has borderline is the brain is deeply afraid. It didn't build the calm, mirroring connections when this individual was growing up. And so the brain became very concerned that every person around them and every situation that they found themselves in was going to hurt them, was going to harm them. And so the brain will see someone's facial expression or hear the tone of their voice, or they won't show up for 5 minutes, and in normal humans, it's like we might get anxiety and we might be like, oh my God, do they hate me? Are they not going to show up? Like, did I say that wrong? What's going on? And there's like, well, that's like normal. And then there's like, they didn't answer for 5 minutes. They hate me. No, actually, I hate them. And I'm going to text them a bunch of times because we cannot withstand the way that we feel. And really, I think borderline personality disorder is like the human condition blown up. Like, every emotion is just so much more, and most people don't understand it. And the emotions that are more are usually the ones that create the stigma: more anger, more anxiety, more paranoia, more desire to control your environment because you're afraid. And so it's like, oh no, I keep these people away from me. But ultimately what's going on is a deep, deep sense of feeling and not knowing where it is safe or how it is safe to manage those feelings. And so we are humans and we have emotions, and other humans have emotions. And if you don't know how to handle emotions, you're fucked. Ultimately, you're fucked in the world. And so the work really is realizing that, learning how to control that, and accepting that you have to live in the world acknowledging that sensitivity. You have to acknowledge that when someone like looks at you like you've said something wrong, but they're actually just curious or confused, they're not looking at you like you're disgusting, but the brain doesn't think that. The brain doesn't know. And so in order to overcome borderline personality disorder, or really any personality disorder, it's realizing that you are not your brain, which is part of what my book shares. Your brain is unconscious. Your brain has its own mind, and you have to learn it. You have to befriend it. You have to watch it and go, why are you thinking that? I don't want to act like that, and do the work to undo what your brain knows.
Wow. There's so much in that. And I just love the way that you articulate it, because it makes so much sense. And like you said at first, it sounds so scary. Like, it sounds like when I hear that, honestly, I think to myself, do I need to be like locked up?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. And that, I think that's the perception we have of some of this. But then listening to it, it's like, gosh, yes, I have definitely been the person that did not know how to manage my emotions. And I felt crazy inside of my head at points. And so do we all like, is this a spectrum? And does everyone fall somewhere on a spectrum, the spectrum with BPD? Does everyone have a little bit of this at some point in their life? Or what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, it might be a bold statement, but I would argue that it's true. And the only reason I would argue that it's true is we don't become unhuman getting a personality disorder. We're still humans. And so not all humans have personality disorders, but everyone that has a personality disorder is a human. And so, yeah, everyone experiences what we do, just not at the proportion that we do. And maybe not everybody experiences suicidality or self-harm, which can be behaviors that happen because your emotions are just so intense. But, sometimes it is kind of a common thought, like just like, oh, I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning. Or like, you're just so angry at yourself and you're like, why did I do that? Like very casually, like, why did I do that? But then there are ways where that behavior can become non-adaptive, maladaptive. Like maybe it is helpful to be like, for a second, like snap yourself out of it, but it's not helpful to like literally punch yourself in the face as an example. But, there's just definitely different intensities. Mm-hmm. And part of what my book does is it normalizes that. It's like, hey, we're all human. And I think we might all look at people's symptoms differently. If we could just pause and realize I might not understand their full experience, but I do understand their experience enough to not completely pathologize it and treat them not like a human.
Okay. I think this is probably where your book is leading. But how do we help manage it? I know this isn't something that you solve. It's not like you take a pill and this is fixed. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about that? And I would love to kind of hear, because I think your book is a little bit of a expander on the 12 steps, or it's like even more, maybe not an expander, but like its own version of that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Definitely. I mean, really the book, so it's called Your Unconscious is Showing, Take Control of Your Life Using the 12 Steps of Consciousness. And, for anyone listening, I just like, if you think about behaviors that you engage in that you've already tried to stop and you're still doing them, thoughts that you have about yourself or people from your past or people in your present, and you're like, I really wish I didn't think that about them, or I really just wish that thing that happened between me and them could get out of my memory. Or maybe you feel really stuck in your career or in your education or in your relationship, and you're wondering like, why am I stuck? What is the thing that's not allowing me to be the person that I want to be or stop doing what I no longer want to do? So like thinking about those behaviors and realizing that you're still in it. How are you still in it? Why are you still in it? The first thing to recognize is that there's a part of you that feels like you are not in control of what is happening. Yeah. Whether that is you're not in control of your future, you're not in control of the trajectory of the career that you're on, you're not in control of your partner, you're not in control of your work schedule. Yes, you are. And there are ways that you can be. Of course, there's relationships you could be in that are controlling, financial situations where you have to stay at the job that you're at. And the way that you feel about those things is the reason you're not doing something about them. But why do you feel the way that you feel? Because your brain thinks a certain way about what's going on. What is your definition of success? What is your level of self-worth outside of that relationship? What was the relationship you saw growing up with your parents? What did they say your career should be like? And there's more to it even. That sounds like go to therapy, right?
Right.
But there's way more to it, because if we're just thinking, why am I in this situation and how do I get out of it? That's not addressing all the parts that are controlling you, just like you mentioned earlier. And our body's sending us messages too. Like our heart racing when we're at dinner with this person, or when we wake up and have to drive to work, and we're ignoring messages, and we are living in stories that no longer make us happy. And we're making decisions, or I should say, we're allowing our brain to make decisions for us without pausing to say, is fear leading this? Is an old definition I no longer want to be living my life through leading this? and what is controlling my life, because it's really not us until we stop to ask, who is it if it's not us? And it's our brain, it's our body, and it's our mind doing things based on our past that we think are us, but they're not.
Gosh, this is so good for anyone to hear this, because when we can kind of separate that, I think it helps you lessen the attachment of feeling like there's something wrong with me. At least it did for me.
Exactly.
I used to have such a challenge in relationships. Like I could not get calm. I just had this like old narrative. There was always fights happening. There was always something. Granted, I wasn't picking the most amazing humans. But then even when I met my partner now, the first year and a half was hard. And it was hard because I was like working with this old narrative, to your point. I had to go through so much of my past trauma. Like there was so much I had to do. And I'm so grateful I chose, because I was just so tired of this out of control feeling. But I would literally have these conversations of like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be that person that can be content in a relationship. And it just reminds me of what you're saying, because there was like a whole other operating system that would take control in those moments.
Exactly. A lot of the things that you're saying, like almost verbatim, are from the book. Like there's a section called All Your Parts, and you mentioned that. There's like a section about having a completely separate operating system that's automatic. Like you're on point. You're right there.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad. This is why I have, seen your work. I've been following you, and some of what you have shared, again, just kind of normalizing these things, but not just normalizing and saying, oh yeah, this is totally fine behavior, not normalizing it in that way, but normalizing it in like, this is actually what's going on. So you don't have to be like so scared of it. And I think that's what it is also doing for people, is kind of taking themselves off the hook a little bit too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a perspective that I have in the book. It's a section, and it says, let's make being self-conscious a good thing.
Yeah.
Why is it a bad thing? It's a bad thing because let's imagine we have a flashlight and we can point it in to look at ourselves. And we're given a flashlight when we're born, but we're given a flashlight by our mom, who put a filter on the flashlight of what she wanted to see, what she wanted you to be. And then she said, go ahead and look inside at yourself. Society says you shouldn't look like that. You shouldn't act like that. Here's a flashlight with our filter. Go ahead and look at yourself. And we're never really given permission to be conscious of ourselves unless we are demanded by the outside with a filter placed on by them. And true self-consciousness, being conscious of ourselves, should be a choice that we make on our own in a positive way. Say, I want to look in with my flashlight and see all the shit. I need to see it. I want to see it. I want to work on it. Remove the shame and increase the curiosity and make it a choice to be self-conscious.
Yeah. Got that flashlight analogy. That's gold, because I've never quite heard it like that. Like, of course we hear about like all the narratives that get attached to us, but I like that filter piece, because it's totally how we're trying to see ourselves, and it gets muddied. And to your point, like, why is this not celebrated more? To go on this, like the actual inner work, which I think is like this buzzword, but this is the real shit, right? Like this is the raw truth of what that even means, I feel like.
Totally. And people think it's like, oh, you must be woo woo, all spiritual to get conscious. And it's like, humans are conscious. Like, sorry, sweetie, I know you don't want to be spiritual, but you are conscious because you are awake and you are talking to me. You have consciousness. And it's not a spiritual woo woo thing. It is the reason you know you're alive. It's the reason you know who you are. And like, we need to use our ability to look inward and to be present to control ourselves and our lives.
How have you become so enlightened and full of this kind of wisdom? Like, what is it that has guided you forward to writing this book, to just becoming so aware of all of this?
That's a good question. How did you become so aware of all of this? I mean, It is a blessing and it is a curse. I really do believe that my autism plays a major role in it. Like
Mm.
I've never learned something and forgotten it. And I've been obsessed with psychology since I was like 10. And I don't know, I have a gifted brain and it just absorbs all the stuff and then it creates a spider web of everything I've ever learned. And that's like one thing, to have a really smart brain that can memorize all the shit that you can see behind me and all these books, for example. But I think the reason it's become wisdom and not just knowledge is because of how much I feel and everything that I've been through, and how like I didn't go to school for 12 years, like after like high school, to learn psychology just to be someone that spit back out what the books told me. I have felt what the books have told me, and I have felt what my clients have experienced, and I have felt the largest experiences of human emotion that most humans will never feel, because I have a personality disorder. And that's why it's a blessing and a curse. But so it's like I am an embodied psychology textbook and I'm full of human emotion. And I think every day that I make a decision to live, I have to live that truth. I can't be anybody else. I think I would fall into a really deep, deep depression if I didn't share my actual truth and just say, this is the way my brain works. This is what I'm really good at. And this is the way that I feel. And I think if we all did that a little more, like really, like, this is what makes me feel good. And this is all that I know. And this is what I'm going to do. There'd be less depression, less anxiety, less loneliness, and less people living a life that they don't want to.
Gosh, I love that. And I think you're right. There are so many people kind of, I always say like sleepwalking through life. And I definitely was one of those,
Yes.
where there's just kind of like going through the motions. And I feel like if we can awaken enough people, and perhaps by somebody like you living out that example in action, that can help illuminate somebody to like walk in their own truth as well.
Definitely.
Have you always had this? Like when you were little, not had this, but when you were younger, did you think you were going to be a therapist? Like, did you see yourself on this path? Because it kind of feels to me like you've always known that you were meant to help people in this way, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I went to rehab for the first time when I was 15 for methamphetamine and psychedelics. And while I was there, I fell in love with the treatment world, which was very surprising to me. And my goal was to be the white van driver. Like there was a white van everybody would drive in. And I'm like, I'm not going to be the client. I'm going to be the white van driver. And now I'm the CEO and founder of treatment centers instead of just being the white van driver. But I think what it really was for me was like, I just grew up experiencing mental health and substance use issues all around me. Then I found substances and I was like, oh, these can make me not feel my feelings. How fun. Like, I love this. I've been searching for something for so long. And so I just had a bunch of questions like, why is the world like this? Why are humans like this? Why do I feel this way? What the fuck is going on this planet? Like, this is such a weird experience. And then I went to rehab and I was like, wait, there are people answering the questions that I've had my whole life, and you can go to school for it and you can make people better. I am going to do this. And so at 15, I set out to work in treatment centers and now I own them.
Oh my gosh. And they're called Exist centers, right?
Yes. Yeah. There was the first one was in Santa Barbara, and that one was called Good Heart Recovery. And the goal was to show that every person with substance use issues still had a good heart. And now this one's called Exist, and it fuses substance use and borderline personality disorder. And we're the only outpatient in the country that treats both.
Wow, that's phenomenal. What has that been like, opening that center for you and like reflecting back on that time when you had the aha of like, gosh, there's actually people here who are making it make sense for everyone else. What's that process been like?
It's been amazing. I mean, we opened it in our hometown and we treat our neighbors and our community members. And it's incredible to literally drive by streets where I know I've passed out underneath cars, and that's on my way to a treatment center where I'm treating people who are experiencing the same thing right now.
Wow. That just gave me chills. Do you believe, because sometimes I'm a believer that we are gifted our darkness so that we can then help others through theirs. Do you think that you were gifted this experience of going through some of the drug addiction and all of that because you were the one that was meant to help serve other people in that type of way?
I think that's a question that people can either say, are you saying that we have to experience bad things? And I don't think that that's what you're saying necessarily. Like you must experience bad things, but if you do,
no,
then you can. Yeah. But I mean, I'm prefacing it with that because anyone that's listening that might have that reaction, like, oh, is that? I don't think that's what's going on here. But I think it's important to acknowledge that. I think that as humans, we have the ability to take what we experience and turn it into something. And so we can have these things happen to us. And part of being able to make it into something purposeful and meaningful is to not push it away. But that's what we do as humans. And that's in the book too, is it's painful.
Yeah.
I don't want to experience this. I don't want to feel this. Why did this happen to me? It did happen, or it's happening. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so there's nothing you can do about the fact that it happened. And so what are we going to do about the fact that it happened? And we're going to do something about it. And we're going to make it the best that we can. And humans have the potential to do that because we are conscious. We are some of the most conscious beings on the planet. And we waste our potential by pushing the pain away when we need to look at it because it is a part of us. It matters to our brain and our body. Sometimes our brain and our body are screaming about the pain and we are ignoring it. And ultimately the message could be, this is something that is important. This is something that can change your life in the positive, not just in the negative. So please stop not looking at it. Yeah. And that's the whole point of your unconscious is showing. Look at it. Look at it and change your goddamn life because you can. I know you can.
That is like, we could just end the episode right there. We're not going to, but we're going to just like end the episode right there. That is so powerful. Like you need to look at it. And I love the book that is helping us do that in a way, because here's the other thing is I was thinking about, my past, and I would never consider myself like, I don't know. I never thought of myself as an addict, although I think that term can be, who knows. But I was like, gosh, I feel like something is off and I need something. I need help. I don't know what I need. I wanted a 12-step program, but I couldn't fit myself in a box. Like I was like, I'm not here and I'm not there. And I don't know what to do. And so I kind of feel like your book would have been the perfect thing for like younger me at that moment that I was looking to put myself in one of those boxes. Am I kind of on par with what I'm saying there?
Completely. Because even myself going to rehab, I'll say I was addicted, then I'll say I wasn't addicted. And it's like, what's the definition that we're going with? And then people are like, she's so inconsistent. And I'm like, inconsistency is good, actually. I need a flexible personality. It's okay to be inconsistent. But ultimately, it's like, I didn't really resonate with like the full 12 steps either. Like, I don't need to never use again. And I'm not like a lifelong addict, but I've done things that I don't like. And there are things controlling me that I don't want them to. And so there was such benefit to that process, but there were also such significant limitations for so many people who wanted to take control of their life using the 12 steps without having to either go the religious route, even use the word God, even if it is to their understanding. What did we really need? We needed to take that process out of substance use, out of the term of addiction, and make it understood that every human is unconscious. Every human has behaviors that we want to change, and every human has the potential to change them and to become more conscious. And the 12-step process has been brilliantly proven to work. And part of that is because you don't do it alone. Eventually, even if you start helping someone else and you do the steps alone initially, you don't do it alone. And you actually admit publicly, even though it says it's anonymous, it's also not anonymous, because when you admit the things that you've done, you have to tell another person.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's in the anonymous group. And not only do you have to admit your wrongs to another person, you have to go and make amends to all the people that you've hurt. And that's not necessarily part of therapy. And that's not part of any evidence-based intervention, is to go and apologize and make amends for all the shit that you've done. It's recommended, but it's not an actual step of therapy, but it is a step of the 12. But it is one of the 12 steps. And so the 12 steps is asking you to believe that you can be conscious, look at your unconscious, do something about it, admit how unconscious you've been and to the people that you've been unconscious toward, continue learning about your unconscious, and then help someone else become conscious like you did, because that's what I'm doing. I'm showing my conscious change, and I'm allowing people to realize that they have the potential to do that too. And ultimately, that's what a sponsor is in AA.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this process is something that you yourself have been walking this whole entire time.
Yep.
And that's where the premise of this book came from, I'm guessing, is that you were realizing this and then had to put it out into the world? Or what was the moment that you were like, this is the time for this book. I need to get it out there.
Yeah. So this book was actually not going to be what it was. Or what it is now. And it was more so like more memoir type and more like, let's look at my life story. And then I had changed it when I had already been 3 months into writing the book. And then my mental health got really bad. I was pregnant with my daughter. I had just done IVF, which was very traumatizing for my sensitive body. And I was drowning. My mental health was the worst it's ever been. And I had to return to what I knew worked. And I had to return to doing the 12 steps, even though I was pregnant. But I was like, I wanted to go through that process again. But then I also needed to go through therapy, and the therapy that I knew worked. And I needed to do both. But then I thought, wait, this is the real process of healing. This is the real work that I've been doing since I was 15 years old, is I've done both of these processes at the same time. And I've never adhered to the restrictions of 12-step. And I've never really believed that the evidence-based practices from therapy needed to be contained only in therapy. These are things we can do on our own. So I reached out to my agent and I said, I have a crazy fucking idea. I'm going to rewrite the whole book. And instead of making it the story of my life, I want to make it a way for people to change the story of their own. Can I do it? And she said, you have 5 months. Good luck. And I did it. And I actually submitted the full manuscript 20 hours before my daughter was born.
Oh my gosh. 20 hours?
20 hours.
You were about to like have her. So you were literally.
I submitted it and went to the ER. The same day.
Okay, that is not only like radical, but I feel like really spiritual in a like cool sacred way of like, you just birthed this manuscript and you're literally going to like go birth new life.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was wild. I was like, my email to my agent said, "Dear Cece, here is my manuscript with 20 hours left to spare. I am now going to the hospital. I hope you like it."
Yeah, you cannot critique it because I'm going to be in labor.
Yeah, it's perfect. Here you go.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm thinking about your daughter too, and all the work that you do, the way you show up. What is, some of the impact or the resonance that you hope comes through and translates to her in the way that you show up?
I have a son as well. He's 6.
Okay. So
I think really what it is I know so much more than my parents did. I mean, really, my parents know fucking nothing. It's like so obvious that they're such unconscious people. And it's still something I'm coming to terms with. And I really want them to do the 12 steps. But ultimately, they probably won't. And that's acceptance. And I know so much about the human brain and the human body and the human mind. And so when I'm raising my children, I am teaching them what anger is. I'm not just teaching them that anger is okay and like how to handle anger. I'm teaching them this is what's happening in your brain. Because you're not an angry child. You are a child with an angry brain. And I want you to understand that, because when you just feel like but we can talk about humans in general. When you just feel like an angry human, you might feel like something's wrong with you. But if you feel like a human with an angry brain, you feel like maybe there's something you could do about it, because it's just an organ in your body, just like every other organ. It's workable. Yeah. And so I'm teaching my kids to be self-conscious from the get-go in a good way, to give them an unfiltered flashlight, to allow them to look at themselves and create themselves in a conscious way, instead of learning at least 15 years of unconsciousness and then having to go to rehab to realize that there are things that you can do to change your behaviors, and to teach them that before the behaviors happen.
So beautiful. Something that was just coming through to me was like, gosh, I wonder if, we can kind of rephrase self-love in the sense of like, loving your whole consciousness, like loving the unconscious parts too. And like looking at that as the ultimate form of self-love.
It is.
Because sometimes I think we, self-love is a bubble bath or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the way that you just articulated it is so much deeper than that. But that's like such a lasting impact, because it just reminds me of this like effect that they can then have on other people. And of course you're having this effect on others, but for your children, that just feels so profound. It sounds like you have some challenge with your parents, and I know we're like wrapping this up, but as I was thinking about your transparency and just some of the things that you have fully disclosed online, is there something currently that you are still dealing with that feels like it's a challenge that you're like, gosh, I'm still actually working through this real time today?
That's such a good question. Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking that. Let me think. Actually, yeah, there is something. So, and it's pretty relevant to my whole Truth Doctor story. So that first treatment center I told you about in Santa Barbara, Good Heart Recovery, I sold it in 2021. And I did that because my dad was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2020. And that was really hard for me as a daughter, because we had a very difficult relationship growing up. He just wasn't around. My parents were never married. And after I had my son and, I was making good money, I was like, my dad's going to come live near me and we are going to be able to repair our childhood, the relationship that we never got to have. And then he'll get to have the relationship that he wanted with me as a child with my son. And 3 weeks into him coming, he was diagnosed with MS and his symptoms started getting horrible right away. And that was 5 years ago, which is crazy to think about. Was February of 2020 that the symptoms started. And the difficulty about both of my parents being unconscious is that my dad's unconsciousness is preventing him from helping himself. He has certain beliefs about him as a man, certain beliefs about him with the healthcare system and medication and the word strength and what that really means. And it's like all these things that are unconscious. And at the same time, he has all these values of like, I love my daughter. I want to live a long time. I want great relationships with my grandkids. But both of those things cannot exist at the same time. You cannot have the conscious goal of being close with your family and then unconsciously be allowing your health to go to shit. Yeah. And so that's kind of like where we can all reflect and think, what is something I want and what am I doing and why am I doing it? And so for me, something that's really difficult is we still get in pretty bad arguments. And we've never argued ever until we tried our hardest to be close and this thing got in between us. And so that's difficult for me because it's rattling my concept of father and it's rattling my concept of family stability and what I wanted for my future. And so how am I dealing with this, right? For anyone who resonates in a similar way to like seeing someone that you love want to be one way and then they're acting another way, and you might be a therapist and you might be their family member and you might know exactly what to say and they should probably listen to you. They aren't. And so step one, not from the 12 steps, but step one for this is accept it. Accept it. Doesn't mean you like it. It means this is what's happening. And now that I know that this is what's happening, I can do something about it because I'm admitting the truth of like the reality of the situation. So start there. yes, I see it and it's real. And then how do I feel about it? And really check in there. Don't push any of those feelings away. And then what behaviors will allow you to stay in your own values while dealing with the situation? And reflecting and always going back to that. You say, I accept what's happening. How am I feeling about it? These feelings are okay. And how can I next behave in my values, regardless of how I am feeling? And that's DBT. And that's how you heal from borderline. And that's how you heal from being a human that is out of control in situations that are uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. How can I act in accordance to my values? That's really, really good. And this example, I feel like so many people can relate on so many different levels. I think we've probably all at some point kind of been there where we're watching a friend or family member who says, gosh, I want this, and they're not doing the work to help themselves. And it is really tough. I mean, especially when they're somebody that's really close to you. Thank you for sharing that. I don't, excuse me, I don't ask that question because I want to hear the challenges and the pain necessarily. But I think a lot of podcasts or conversations that I listen to, they always share the overcome, like where they're at now. I'm like, oh gosh, I've overcome all of this. And I like to have the conversation of like, well, yeah, but what are you dealing with now? Because that's what I also, relate to. And I think it just paints a more realistic picture. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I have a tradition on this podcast where I am asking the guests that I interview to leave like a quote or a reflection or something for the next guest, not knowing who it is. So what I'd like to do is just share the quote that was left from my last guest for you, and then invite you the opportunity to do the same.
I love that.
So the last guest shared, she said, there's always a metaphorical curtain to be pulled back. Whoever you are looking at and potentially comparing yourself to, if you're struggling with that, whether it's someone else making way more money, or if it's someone who's climbed the corporate ladder higher, or if it's someone on the TV screen, you also want to make sure you're not comparing your day 1 to someone else's day 3,000. And you've got to remember that maybe this person has way more experience and a large team supporting them. But just remember that there's always a metaphorical curtain to be pulled back.
I love that.
Yeah, I liked it too. And I always end up needing to hear whatever people share. So
yeah.
Love to ask you if you have anything you'd like to leave, just something that's on your heart. It doesn't have to be a specific quote, but anything you feel called to share.
I don't know why this randomly just came up for me, but I feel like maybe it's because of what I just shared, like the story of what I'm still dealing with. And I don't know why I feel so hesitant to say it. But I think what I want to leave the next person, and I would love to know what they think about it, is that thing that you're not saying to that person. It is time to say it to that person.
Ooh. I felt that in my whole chest. That just hit me because I'm thinking about something that I've been needing to share. And anyway, we'll just keep that. I'm not going to say that, but I think I will share that with the next guest and I will report back. But that'd
be great.
That's really deep. I'm so glad that came to you. Thank you for sharing that. And this has been just truly like such an honor. I have loved getting to share time with you. I feel like I wish you lived like next door. We could go and grab coffee and talk for hours, but truly, I just appreciate you. And I think your impact is further and deeper than you could ever imagine. And I just am so grateful that there are women like you who are helping women like me rewrite some narratives and believe in ourselves and shine light on all of our unconscious. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to share space with you as well. I would love to come back anytime.
Thank you for tuning into the show today. And before you go, I just have one quick favor to ask of you. There is a really simple way that you can help support me and help support this show, and that is to hit that follow button on whatever app you're listening to the show on. I'm trying really hard to level up the content and deliver unique value and amazing guests, and just hitting that follow button is the magic that will help continue to empower that. And remember that the world deserves to hear your voice and your stories, and you deserve a place at the top.